Before you judge her, hear her story. A woman, shattered by war, burdened by silence, and clinging to survival, was forced to face what no wife should ever endure. In a world collapsing around her, she stood alone, except for the man she loved, who could no longer move or speak. Backhand index pointing right if this glimpse into her struggle moves you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories of resilience and love in the darkest places. The village had always been quiet. Tucked in the dry folds of a war-torn valley, it was a place where life moved slowly, where prayers echoed louder than gunfire, and children still dared to chase birds between half-crumbling walls. But lately, even the birds had stopped flying. Zahara, a young widow in all but name, spent her days in a dim room beside her husband, Saif. Once a proud mechanic with callous hands and a loud, hearty laugh, he now lay frozen, his body intact, but his soul somewhere distant. It had been 16 days since the bombing that brought half their home down. 16 days of stillness, of no blinking, no words, no movement. Zahara never stopped hoping. She washed him each morning with boiled rainwater, combed his hair, and whispered to him as if he could still respond. Their 2 daughters, Layla and Noor, too young to grasp the gravity of their father's silence, had begun to treat him like a strange kind of doll, something to look at, but never play with. That morning, Zahara woke to Layla's voice. "Ami Buklagi Hai." She opened the rusted tin cabinet and found nothing. No rice, no flour, not even salt. By the time she returned from the village pharmacy, where she pleaded in vain for another serum bottle on credit, her hands were trembling from shame. Even sugar water was running out. Desperation led her to her aunt's home, hoping for kindness. But kindness was scarce in these times. The door opened just enough for a stranger's face to peer out, unfamiliar and cold. "She doesn't live here anymore," the woman said. No offer to step in, no warmth. She walked back carrying nothing but wind. And when she returned to her home, her daughters were trying to pull the last tube from their father's mouth. "Stop!" she cried, yanking them away. The silence in the room returned louder than ever. That night, as rain tapped on what remained of the tin roof, Zahara lit a single oil lamp. Shadows stretched across the wall like old ghosts. She sat by Saif, brushing his hair once more, whispering, "I wish I knew if he were still in there." Outside, the air grew heavier with distant echoes, marching boots. Voices not of the village. And Zahara felt the weight of the coming storm settle on her chest. She didn't know that by the next morning, soldiers would arrive, or that they'd bring with them a kind of devastation she'd never imagined. But she knew one thing. The war had finally reached her doorstep. They say silence builds walls between people. But in Zahara's broken home, it did something else. It taught her to speak to a man who couldn't reply, and in doing so, she remembered who she really was. Amid hunger, fear, and gunfire, the bond between a motionless man and a burdened woman only deepened. Not with words, but with the aching truth of survival. Dust seeped into the cracked window frames, coating everything, even Saif's eyelashes. Zahara wiped them gently every morning, speaking softly as she did. Her words had become more honest lately, even cruel sometimes. Perhaps because she believed he couldn't hear her, or maybe because no one else would listen. She began to tell him things she had buried. How his absence during the first 3 years of their marriage had left her vulnerable in a house full of cold glares and unwanted touches. How his mother had made her feel like a servant. How she had cried on their wedding night. Not because she missed him, but because she had to sit next to a framed photo instead of a husband. "I was only 17, she whispered one evening, watching the sun bleed orange behind the hills. "And you were already out playing hero." No reply came from Saif. Just a quiet rhythm of shallow breathing and the occasional twitch that could have been a reflex or a miracle. She no longer tried to guess. Her daughters clung to her now more than ever. Layla had begun to sleep under the bed, afraid of the men with boots. Noor would sit beside Saif and hum lullabies as if trying to wake him up with music. Zahara didn't stop her. It was the only thing that didn't sound like war. Food was still a battle. The young soldier who had spat near their door had returned, leaving behind silence and fear. Zahara started storing pieces of flatbread in the cracks of the floor, hiding them the way a mother bird hides eggs. Not for safety, but for control. Sometimes at night, she would sit beside Safe and imagine things. What if he was pretending? What if he could hear everything? The resentment, the confessions, the pain. One night, she asked out loud, "If you ever wake up, will you forgive me for hating you sometimes?" The oil lamp flickered. A breeze moved through the empty hallway. She smiled bitterly. Right, that's what I thought. And yet, she stayed by his side. There was a strange comfort in the routine. The ritual of wiping his lips, adjusting his bandages, whispering her secrets. Safe had become her journal, her mirror, her stone. And though he never spoke, his presence anchored her, reminded her of the life she'd once hoped for. The war outside raged on. Distant gunshots, loudspeakers, helicopters that screamed through the sky like angry gods. But inside that room, there was a different war, quieter, deeper, and slowly, without realizing it, Zahara had begun to lose a line between love and memory, between duty and healing. Some secrets don't hide. They wait. They breathe behind closed doors and whisper through memories until they can no longer be buried. In the dim silence of Zahara's home, truths she never wanted to face begin to rise, and the man who cannot move becomes the only witness to the unraveling of everything she thought she had survived. It happened on a Thursday. Zahara was in the kitchen, what little was left of it, trying to cook lentils over a tiny flame fed by torn notebook pages. The water had barely started to bubble when she heard her daughter's scream. She dropped the pot and ran into the next room. Layla and Noor stood frozen, pointing at their father's hand. It had moved. Not much, just a twitch of 2 fingers. But it was real. Zahara rushed to his side, calling his name, shaking him gently. "Safe? Safe, can you hear me?" Her voice cracked with a hope she hadn't dared feel in weeks. Nothing more came from him. No sound, no blink, no movement. But the twitch haunted her. It was enough to keep her awake all night, staring at him by candlelight, wondering if her words had reached him after all. And that terrified her, because what had she said? What had she confessed? The next morning, she found herself scrubbing the floor beneath Safe's bed, not because it needed cleaning, but because she couldn't look at him. As she scrubbed, her mind wandered to memories she had locked away for years. Her father's face, stern, silent, more affectionate toward his birds than his daughters. He had spent every coin on his fighting quails. Even bet her eldest sister's future on one. The bird lost. Her sister was married off at 12 to a man 4 times her age. Zahara had learned then, silence wasn't peace. It was power. It was punishment. And it always came with a cost. She had never told anyone that she was the one who released the birds that night, how the neighborhood cat had torn them apart, one by one, while she watched in the shadows. That same night, her father had struck her across the face for the first time. "You'll pay for this," he had said. Maybe she was still paying. Back in the present, Zahara looked at Safe and whispered, "You weren't there when I needed you. Not on our wedding day. Not when your brothers locked me in that cellar. Not when your mother said I was cursed for giving birth to daughters." She paused. Her chest rose and fell, her voice trembling now. "You always thought war was outside these walls. But I've been fighting one in here every day." Safe didn't move. But for the first time, his lips were slightly parted, as if about to speak, or maybe just breathing differently. She leaned in closer. "I should hate you," she whispered. "But I don't. I wish I did." The truth lingered in the air like smoke. She pulled back, eyes wet, not from sadness, but from release. She had finally said it. The truth she'd swallowed for 10 years. And somewhere deep inside her, the weight began to shift. Not all wars are fought on battlefields. Some are fought in bedrooms, between memory and silence, shame and survival. As soldiers breached the walls of Zahara's home, the thin line between her dignity and desperation snaps. What she does next isn't just to protect her family. It's to survive a world that never gave her a choice. It began with boots. Heavy, careless. Stomping boots on cracked stone. Zahara had heard them before, the rhythm of control, of strangers claiming space that was not theirs. But this time, they didn't pass by her house. They stopped right outside her door. She froze, her hand still holding the cloth she had been using to wipe Safe's face. 3 knocks. Not hard, just certain. Her daughters ran to her, eyes wide with terror. "Ammy, they're back." She moved fast, like a shadow trained by fear. She hid Safe behind a crumbling wall panel in the back room, the only place untouched by the explosion weeks ago. She stuffed a few blankets over him, whispered, "Don't make a sound," knowing he couldn't answer, and closed the panel. By the time she opened the front door, her heart had nearly stopped beating. 3 men stood there, dirty uniforms, tired eyes, and one, barely more than a boy, holding a rusted rifle too big for his frame. "Where's the man of the house?" one asked. Zahara's voice came dry and thin. "I'm a widow." They stepped inside anyway. One of them kicked aside her cooking pot, spilling precious lentils onto the floor. Another opened cupboards, finding nothing of value. But it wasn't hunger in their eyes. It was power. Hunger was easier to survive. "Do you live here alone?" the young soldier asked. "With my daughters," she replied, her hands trembling behind her back. "And what do you do here alone?" His tone changed. A slow, implied menace curled in his voice. She understood what he meant. She swallowed. Then she lied. "This is my workplace. I offer company. For money." A silence fell. One soldier snorted. The older one raised an eyebrow. The young one didn't laugh. He looked at her too long, like he didn't believe her or maybe believed her too much. None of them touched her. Not that time. They left. But not before the younger one spat near her feet, a final insult carved from disgust and desire. Zahara didn't speak for hours after they were gone. She fed her daughters quietly. She checked on Safe, still unmoving, still mute. But his eyes had tears in them, not rolling, just resting there, as if waiting for permission to fall. She stared at him. "Did you hear that?" No answer. But something broke inside her, not just fear, not just shame. It was the weight of having to become something she never was, just to keep her children alive. She had always thought she could bend without breaking. But now, cracks were showing, and the war outside, it had finally found its way inside her bones. He heard her lie. He watched her lower herself to protect him. And yet he said nothing. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's a punishment that speaks louder than screams. Safe hadn't moved since the soldiers left. Zahara sat on the edge of the wooden crate beside his hidden alcove, her fingers mindlessly tightening and loosening the end of her dupatta. She didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because even her tears felt too loud. The girls were asleep now, curled together like kittens under a thin sheet. The fear had exhausted them, but Safe's eyes were wide open, watching her, not blinking, not speaking. She finally whispered, "You heard me, didn't you?" No response. "You think I wanted to say that?" Her voice cracked. "You think I wanted them to look at me like that?" She turned fully toward him now, her face illuminated by the flickering oil lamp. "Do you think I am that woman I pretended to be?" Still no answer. But his silence, it burned more than any accusation. Her hand reached for his arm. "Say something, Safe. Please. Even if it's to hate me." His fingers twitched. Barely. And then, so faint she thought she imagined it, he moved his lips, not to speak, but to exhale sharply. A sigh that carried months of hidden ache. "You protected me," he finally whispered. Zahara leaned in. "Then why do I feel like I've lost you?" Safe's eyes turned away, toward the ceiling. "Because I didn't stop them. I didn't protect you." The word stabbed her more than anything the soldiers could have done. "You were paralyzed," she replied softly. "You couldn't." "But I heard everything," he snapped, his voice louder now, shaky but pained. "I heard you offer yourself like—" He stopped. Shame flooded his face. He turned away again. "I did it for you," she said, more firmly now. "For the girls. For this house. For what's left of us." Silence again. Then Safe's next words came like stone dropped in still water. "You didn't lie." Zahara flinched. What? You didn't lie. You are doing all this for us, but it's killing you, Zahara. I see it. Every time I look at you, I see a new crack. Her chest heaved with quiet sobs now, not from regret, but from the pain of being seen too clearly. What choice do I have? She asked. Saif didn't answer. Instead, slowly, with the fragile strength of someone who hasn't moved in weeks, he reached out his hand. It trembled as it crossed the space between them. She stared at it, then took it in both of hers. In that small gesture, a war paused, not outside, but inside them both. One moment they were playing on the porch. The next gone. No scream, no trail, just silence, and a mother's heart, instantly torn apart. The morning air was unnaturally still. Even the birds had gone quiet. Zahara had just stepped inside the kitchen for a moment. A quick check on the boiling water for Saif's medicine. The girls were laughing on the front porch, drawing chalk shapes on the cracked concrete. 2 minutes, maybe less. When she returned, the porch was empty. No Noor, no Ania. At first, she thought they were playing hide and seek. Her voice was light. Girls, I'm not playing this morning. Come out now. No giggle, no shuffling footsteps. Her heart fluttered, then dropped like a stone. She stepped onto the dry grass, scanning the horizon. Their tiny slippers lay abandoned by the tree stump. A single red ribbon fluttered from a thorn bush. Then she saw it. A muddy tire trail, fresh and narrow, leading away toward the forest path behind the house. Zahara screamed. Not words, not names, just a primal, bone-deep shriek that cracked through the sky. Saif jolted awake inside. Within seconds, he was at the doorframe, dragging his broken leg across the floor, clutching the wall for balance. What happened? Where are they? Zahara spun around, wild-eyed. They're gone. Noor and Inia are gone. He stared at her, frozen. Then both of them sprinted, Zahara barefoot, down the dirt road. She kept calling, screaming, begging. Inia, Noor, please, baby, answer Mama. But the forest swallowed her voice. They searched for hours. Zahara tore her feet on broken glass and dry thorns. Saif collapsed twice trying to keep up. No blood, no drag marks, no sounds, just silence. And that faint muddy tire track, vanishing into the thick undergrowth. That night, Zahara sat outside the house. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Her hands clutched the ribbon from the bush like it was a lifeline. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. Saif crouched beside her, wincing with every movement. We'll find them, he whispered. She didn't answer. They're smart. They're strong. Like their mother. Still nothing. Then she finally turned to him, not with anger, not even with fear, but with something far worse. Emptiness. And she whispered, I should have let them take me instead. Saif's hand gripped her shoulder, harder than before. Don't ever say that. But her eyes, they had already left the world. Somewhere beyond the trees, 2 little girls were missing. And Zahara, who had survived everything, now faced the one thing she could not fight. When grief drowned the house in silence, a knock at midnight shattered everything. A man stood in the doorway, and he wasn't a soldier, but he knew where the girls were. Rain had started falling, quiet, unrelenting, like the sky itself was mourning with Zahara. Saif was dozing on the floor near the window, an unloaded rifle beside him. He hadn't spoken much, just watched the road. Zahara sat at the girls' empty beds. Inia's doll, Noor's tiny shoe under the blanket. She touched them like they were made of glass. Her lips moved in silent prayer, though no words came out anymore. Then 3 knocks. Sharp, measured, confident. Saif jumped up, grabbing the useless gun. Zahara froze. Midnight. No one came here. Not now. Not ever. Saif limped to the door and cracked it open. The barrel of the empty rifle pointed out. A tall man stood in the rain, face half covered by a scarf, a strange pendant dangling from his neck, a rusted symbol Zahara didn't recognize. I'm not here to hurt you, he said softly. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Saif didn't move. Then why are you here? The man glanced behind him. as if confirming he hadn't been followed. Then he said the words that made Zahara rise from the bed, her blood turning cold. "Your daughters are alive. I've seen them." Zahara pushed past Saif. "What did you just say?" He nodded. "Two little girls. One with a crescent necklace. Other with a missing front tooth. I helped them escape." Zahara's knees buckled. Saif caught her. "You're lying," Saif growled. "I wish I were," the man replied. "But they're being held in a place known as Sector 9, an old outpost off-grid. Not even your army dares go there anymore." "Who are you?" Zahara asked, her voice trembling. "My name's Rafiq," he said slowly. "I used to work with them, the soldiers who took your daughters. But I didn't sign up for this. I didn't know they were trafficking children." The room fell silent. Zahara's voice cracked. "Why come here now?" Rafiq pulled a blood-stained photo from his coat, a blurry image of Noor and Inia in a steel room, curled against each other, frightened but breathing. "Because I couldn't sleep knowing they're still in there. And because I know the guard schedule, the back entrances, the weaknesses." He looked Zahara in the eye. "But if we're going to get them out, we have to move fast. And we can't do it alone." Zahara's voice was barely a whisper. "I'll do anything." Saif hesitated. "How do we know we can trust you?" Rafiq met his gaze. "You don't, but do you have another choice?" Outside, the rain got heavier. But for the first time in days, Zahara felt something strange inside her chest. Hope. With only one map, one former enemy, and a mother's desperation, Zahara walks into the lion's den. But what they find inside is far more horrifying than they imagined. The following night, Zahara stood at the edge of the forest near Sector 9, her hands trembling. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her eyes were razor-sharp, a mother's fire burning behind them. Beside her, Saif crouched, scanning the tree line through stolen binoculars. His face was tight, jaw clenched. Rafiq knelt between them, unfolding a crumpled blueprint of the facility on a rock, illuminated by a dim red torchlight. "It's not a prison," he whispered. "It's worse. It used to be an intelligence post during the last regime. Underground cells. No cameras. No paperwork. Ghost zone." Zahara's heart pounded as she looked at the map. A series of narrow halls, holding chambers, a generator room, 2 possible entry points. "This vent," Rafiq tapped the paper, "connects to the old storage wing. From there, we crawl through maintenance shafts into the lower levels. That's where I saw the girls." Saif grunted. "And the guards?" 8 minimum. All ex-mercenaries. Armed to the teeth. Zahara swallowed. "We're going in anyway." Before they moved, Zahara pulled from her pocket the tiny crescent necklace she had found in Inia's drawer. She kissed it, pressed it against her chest. Then, without another word, they slipped into the dark. The air inside the vent was thick and metallic. Zahara crawled behind Rafiq, feeling every scratch of rust under her palms. Saif covered the rear, clutching a blade in the silence of a man ready to die. They reached a grate. Rafiq held up a hand and signaled stop. Below them, a narrow hallway. 2 soldiers, laughing. One tossing toward the trash, missing entirely. They didn't know anyone was above them. Rafiq motioned. They waited. The guards moved on. One by one, they dropped down silently. Sector 9 smelled like blood and bleach. Zahara felt her knees buckle as they passed one of the cells. Inside, a boy, barely 10, sat against the wall, chained, eyes empty. She wanted to scream, wanted to tear the place down. Rafiq held her back. "We find yours first. Then we come back." Down 2 more halls. Rafiq paused at the door. "This is it," he mouthed. Zahara's breath caught. He picked the lock quickly. They stepped in. At first, nothing. Just darkness. Then, a whisper. "Inia, did you hear that?" "Sure. I think someone's here." Zahara's soul shattered. She ran forward, flipping on a tiny flashlight. 2 girls, wrapped in torn blankets. Pale, eyes wide, but alive. "Mama?" Noor gasped. Zahara dropped to her knees. "Baby, Mama's here." "I'm here." The girls ran into her arms. Inia sobbed so hard she couldn't speak. Noor clung to her like She would never let go again. Saif stood guard at the door, eyes wet. Rafik smiled faintly, almost painfully. Then, boom! An explosion shook the hallway. They know we're here, Rafik growled. Zahara clutched her daughters tighter. This rescue had just become a war. They got the girls, but freedom was still miles away. As alarms blared and soldiers swarmed the halls, Zahara had only one choice: fight like a mother or die trying. Story, approximate, 500 words. The blaring sirens turned the underground facility into chaos. Red lights strode the corridors as Zahara held her daughters close, their tiny hands wrapped around her neck. Saif slammed the door shut and locked it. That blast came from the upper deck. They're flushing us down here. We need to move. Now, Rafik said sharply, already scanning the room for another exit. There! Zahara pointed toward a small duct behind some crates. It leads back to the vent system. I'll clear it, Saif said, pushing aside the crates. Another blast, closer this time, rattled the room, and dust fell from the ceiling. Inia whimpered, clutching Noor. Zahara knelt beside them, her voice calm despite the fear in her eyes. Girls, listen to me. You're strong. Stronger than anyone. We're getting out of here. Okay? Mama's not leaving without you. They both nodded, eyes wide, trusting her completely. Saif cleared the duct entrance. Rafik led the way inside. Then the girls crawled in, Zahara following, and Saif covered the rear once again. But they hadn't made it 10 feet before they heard the metallic clang of the door being blown open behind them. Down that shaft, shouted a soldier. Bullets pinged against the metal just inches behind Zahara's feet. Move, move. Saif roared, throwing a flashbang back down the tunnel. Boom. Screams followed, then coughing, then gunfire. The duct opened into a larger maintenance tunnel, dark, wet, and echoing. They sprinted through it. The girls ran barefoot, and Zahara could see every cut on their little feet, but they didn't complain. Not once. They reached a sealed hatch. Rafik tried to open it, but it was jammed. Locked. Zahara stepped back. Stand aside. She lifted a metal pipe lying on the floor and bashed the latch again. And again. And again. Finally, snap. The hatch creaked open. Outside, cold wind hit their faces. They had reached the edge of the jungle that bordered the war zone. But behind them, the shouts of soldiers still rang out. They ran. Through trees. Over rocks. Under branches. Rafik tossed a smoke canister behind them. That'll buy us 10 seconds. Maybe. Saif spotted the old army jeep they had stashed days ago. Get in. Zahara placed the girls inside first, shielding their heads as she helped them climb into the back seat. She jumped in just as bullets struck the rear of the vehicle. Saif gunned the engine. The jeep tore through the jungle road. Behind them, flames rose from Sector 9. In the back seat, Zahara wrapped her arms around her daughters, rocking them. I told you I'd find you, she whispered. Inia looked up. I knew you would, Mama. But Zahara wasn't done. Not yet, because if this could happen to her daughters, it could happen to others. She turned to Saif. We have to burn it all down. Every last one of their camps. Saif gave her a look that said he was thinking the same thing. The war for her children was over. Now began the war for justice. She got her daughters back, but peace was never the plan. Zahara had one more mission: destroy the monster who built the cages. The safe house was deep in the mountains, miles from any signal. Zahara sat with Inia and Noor, brushing their hair, tried to undo the knots left by months of captivity. The girls clung to her, barely sleeping unless she was near. But their safety wasn't enough. Not while hundreds more children remained in cages, while other mothers still wept in the dark. Across the room, Rafik laid out maps, satellite images, and troop positions. The central hub is in Laker Province. All trafficking routes run through there. Saif added, the man who ran the operation, codenamed Vulture, is holed up in a private fortress. He was in charge of the whole Sector 9 network. Zahara's jaw tightened. She remembered his voice. The way he spoke like her daughters were things, like they didn't matter. We take him out, she said. We end it. 3 nights later, The mountains trembled. Under cover of a moonless sky, Zahara led a strike team of 6 ex-soldiers and rebels into the fortress perimeter. Armed with nothing but stolen weapons, grit, and fury, they cut the power grid before slipping inside. The halls were quiet, too quiet. Then, motion sensors triggered. Alarms. But Zahara was already moving. She cleared the first wing, finding holding cells. Empty. Bloodstains on the floor. Chains on the wall. It was real. All of it. She kicked down the next door, and there he was. Vulture. Bald. Fat. Arrogant. Sitting behind steel bars like he owned the world. He smirked. Come to finish the fairy tale, little mother? Zahara raised her rifle. He didn't flinch. You think killing me will stop it? Another will rise. You'll lose yourself chasing shadows. No, she said, but the shadow dies with you. She didn't shoot him. She handed the gun to Inia. The child stared up at her. Mama? Zahara nodded. You don't have to, but I want you to know you're not powerless anymore. Inia lowered the gun but didn't cry. She simply said, let's go. He doesn't deserve our tears. Safe-cuff the man. Rafik rigged explosives through the compound. As they walked away, fire engulfed the building behind them. The smoke rose into the stars, carrying with it the ashes of pain and the promise of a new dawn. Weeks later, Zahara and her daughter stood before a crowd of freed families. Survivors. Mothers. Children. She held her girls' hands and spoke into a mic. Her voice was steady, but the fire still burned behind her eyes. They tried to break us. They tried to silence us. But we are louder than fear. We are stronger than cages. And we are never going back. Cheers erupted. Inia smiled. Nora clapped. And Zahara? She finally breathed. She was more than a mother now. She was a storm that would never stop rising.